first few years of the 20th century, Russia was suffering massive domestic disorder, as well as the constant threat of foreign invasion. The rich sought amusement, and the church needed a boost.
So the church was looking for genuinely spiritual types from the common people. And likewise, the monarchy was similarly looking for people like Rasputin who could give it some sort of divine authority.
His reputation as a preacher had preceded him, and he had an entree into high circles within the church, and from there into the aristocracy and the royal family.
Tsar Nicholas II and Empress Alexandra lived a life of opulence and luxury, in extraordinary palaces, furnished with gold, and anything their hearts desired. The one dark cloud was that the heir to the throne, Alexei, suffered from haemophilia, an agonizing blood disorder thought incurable.
The Empress was desperate for someone to heal her son, the Tsarevich Alexis, because she had brought haemophilia into the Romanov family through her own family of Hesse. She saw her son's illness, the first male heir to be born, as a punishment from God.
In November 1906, Rasputin was summoned to the royal palace at Tsarskoye Selo to see if his mystical ability to heal could help.
It seems that he was able to stop the bleeding of Tsarevich on occasion, whether this was by hypnotism or by simply his presence, which seemed to have a calming effect, or whether it was because he comforted the mother, who was hysterical.
With the illness of Alexei becoming progressively worse, the Empress was convinced that only a miracle could save her son.
An incident in 1912 really sort of fixed his position there. The Empress was out riding with Alexis, and he had some sort of fall, and the internal bleeding began. In her desperation, the Empress telegrams Rasputin, who's at home in his village in western Siberia.
And by return, he sends a telegram back saying, "God has heard your prayers and seen your tears. The little one will not die. Tell the doctors not to bother him too much." Miracle of miracles, the next morning he recovers, the bleeding stops. That sealed it for Alexandra. A miracle had occurred.
And from that point on, Rasputin's comings and goings at the court became more frequent.
This finally secured Rasputin's position in the royal palace and his place in Russian history forever. With his position in the palace secure and the assurance of the Empress's protection, Rasputin set about abusing every rule in the holy book.
He was a dual character if ever there was one. He could go straight from the Tsarevich's bedside, where he was praying fervently for his recovery, to the brothel down the road. He would boast about his mystical powers as much about his powers as a lover. So, in a sense, you know, his two careers were going apart in parallel.
It's like a pop star suddenly being a star overnight and didn't know what to do with their money or their fame and their power, in a sense. And he had this wonderful power now.
For the ladies of the aristocracy, there was undoubtedly an element of piquancy in this grubby man. This sort of peasant type wandering around the palatial apartments of the aristocracy was obviously an object of fascination.
When socializing with the aristocracy, Rasputin would take immense pleasure in insulting his social superiors.
There'd be a sexual edge to his humiliations. He would dip his grubby little finger in a pot of jam and make one of these princesses lick it clean.
She takes it from him. She does do what he says. She obeys him.
No woman was safe from his advances. The recently widowed Kionia Bilyatska turned to Rasputin for spiritual guidance. She recalled their fateful meeting in her diary.
He instructed me to prepare myself as a woman and began to do what a husband alone is permitted to do. He forced me, caressed me, He then did all he wanted to the end. I felt dirty, impure, for he clearly felt it necessary to subject me to perpetual testing.
Untarnished by his lewd actions, Rasputin split his time between the palatial apartments of the well-to-do and the royal chamber of the Empress herself.
So from about 1912, he's a frequent fixture in the private apartments of the Empress, where he acts, in a sense, as her confidant, her confessor. She obviously took great comfort in his presence, not least because of his calming influence on the boy.
Rasputin was well aware that as long as the prince was alive, he had run of the royal house. The Empress's trust was paramount to Rasputin's quest for fame and power.
Those who were in government positions didn't want the Empress to hear that they were fighting Rasputin. Anybody who didn't like Rasputin lost their job.
The seats of government were filling up with fortune hunters and incompetents, many of whom were happy to pay large amounts to Rasputin for the position.
The best way to describe him is as a fixer. He had acquired so much influence at court that he could really almost do anything. He could make a bishop. He could unmake a bishop. He could ensure that somebody was advanced in a ministry. He even made prime ministers and unmade them.